Good afternoon, folks, and welcome to this week's episode of the Legal Beagle Podcast. This week, we're going to talk about Tiger Woods. He is on everyone's mind because of the single vehicle accident that he was involved in. I should say single vehicle crash that he was involved in earlier this week. There are a lot of unknowns at this point. There's a lot of speculation as to what might have happened. What I'm going to talk about is what a personal injury attorney may look at when considering a single vehicle crash. They're unique in the sense that most of the time when we're dealing with automobile crashes, we're dealing with two vehicles or possibly three or more, but we're not dealing with a single vehicle. When there's a single vehicle crash, there's usually questions as to whether there was something wrong with the vehicle itself, something wrong with the driver of the vehicle, or a combination of the two. There's one exception that needs to be considered here, and this has been something that I heard in an interview of some of the first responders to Tiger Woods' crash. They said that the area where the crash occurred in Los Angeles is an area that has a lot of crashes. It's a dangerous area. I think I'm quoting their words, or maybe I'm not quoting exactly how they described it, but it's an area where it's not unforeseen that there would be a crash. That's a huge problem for the city of Los Angeles, because if they have designed a roadway to be a hazard for the drivers on that roadway, they could bear some responsibility for crashes that occur on that roadway. Even though the argument can be made, well, look, you're the driver of the vehicle. Shouldn't you understand or appreciate the dangers of that roadway and therefore slow down or drive with more caution? Sure, if you've driven it before, if you have familiarity with that roadway, if you understand the dangers of that roadway. The problem is if you're not usually on that roadway, that area of road, if you're not comfortable with that area of road, if you don't understand the sharp turns or potential downhills and bends that may be present in that area, there's an argument that can be made that there's a design defect with the roadway. These types of cases are extremely complicated, and the burden is very, very high. The burden being what you as the plaintiff would have to prove against a governmental entity like the city of Los Angeles, or potentially the county, or maybe even the state. You would have to show that there was knowingly a design flaw in these roadways, or that the city, county, or state was put on notice, told about the dangers of this roadway, maybe the fact that there had been multiple accidents over a short period of time, or lots of accidents over a longer period of time, gives the city notice that there's something wrong here. And maybe a simple warning sign that says slow down isn't sufficient. Maybe there should be a redesign of that, or a reconsideration of how to provide a roadway that's safer for the people that are driving it. That requires what's called a notice of claim. Now, a notice of claim is a notice that you give to any governmental entity to let them know in a certain amount of time. In California, I think it's 181 days, that 181 days from the crash itself. So let's go back to earlier this week. That would be the date of Tiger's crash. He would have 181 days to notify the city that he has an intent to bring a claim against the city for a dangerous condition, the design of this particular stretch of road. The city has an opportunity to evaluate that and then make a decision as to whether they're interested in resolving that claim with Tiger or not. If they're not, then Tiger has an accelerated deadline. We've talked about this in prior podcasts. In our world, they're called statute of limitations, how long you have to file a lawsuit or you lose the right to your claim. In more common language, it's a deadline. What's your deadline to have to file a lawsuit? Otherwise, you can't file a lawsuit. Tiger would have 1 year from the date of his crash to file that lawsuit. That's assuming there's enough evidence to support his claim. The question you might ask is, where do you get the evidence? Where does Tiger find that evidence? Well, he would have a law firm like ourselves work with a investigative team, engineers, roadway design experts to look at this area to determine if the city has failed to mitigate these dangers, has failed to provide safeguards against these dangers, and then look at the prior crash history in that particular area, which is all a little bit more difficult to get because not all of that is public record, but you can find most of it if there are police reports and things of that nature. So it would take time to investigate all of that and then make a determination as to whether there's a claim against a governmental entity, in this case, the city, county, or state. That's an important determination that needs to be made pretty early in your investigation because you have these accelerated deadlines to both let the governmental entity know about your intent to bring a claim, and then you have that accelerated deadline to file your lawsuit because normally you get 2 years. California, you get 2 years to file a lawsuit or you lose the right to do so. The other consideration that a personal injury attorney might look at is what's going on with the vehicle itself. So this was a Genesis. It was a courtesy vehicle provided by the sponsorship of the golf tournament that had just occurred in LA. And so they traditionally have vehicle sponsors. In this case, Genesis was a title sponsor of the event. They provide vehicles for all the golfers. So Tiger's in one of their vehicles. What's going on with that vehicle? And if you've seen images, the vehicle is pretty badly damaged. The whole front end looks crushed. There are some significant issues with not issues. There is significant damage to the vehicle itself. But does that mean there's anything wrong with the vehicle? Maybe. You don't know until you start to look, until you start to investigate. We had a case, a single vehicle case, where a client of ours had a medical episode, ran off the road, hit a tree, and her airbags failed to deploy. That shouldn't happen when you hit a tree at 45 miles an hour. Your airbags should trigger and should deploy, right? So we had to start investigating and asking questions. Why? What happened? So we get experts involved and we start to tear into that vehicle and look at the mechanics of that vehicle, the data the vehicle can provide, and try to figure out what happened in that particular situation. Tiger Woods would have the same potential claim here if there was something wrong with the vehicle. And we just don't know yet at this point, right? We don't know what exactly happened. I think I heard a news report that there are no skid marks on the roadway before he leaves the roadway and veers off of the roadway. That's suspicious, right? Because typically our reaction as drivers is to hit our brakes if there's some sort of issue, whether it's something runs in front of you, whether it's you were texting and all of a sudden you realize the vehicle's going off the road, you still apply the brakes. There's nothing like that. Did the brakes fail? We don't know. There's a lot of speculation as to whether there was intoxication or other contributing factors. We don't know any of that. And that could end up being a determining factor in whether Tiger Woods has a claim here. But what's important is these investigations have to happen quickly. And you should not, as a potential plaintiff in a single vehicle crash, you should not wait for the authorities to do their investigation before you begin yours. They will take an awfully long time to do their investigation sometimes. Sometimes they have to send things out to labs. Sometimes it's just a coordination of the different responders to get all the information into a report. Those reports can take a long time to be produced. They are available to you once they are produced, but you don't want to wait for that and then bring your investigative team in and start looking at this. You want to start early. So if there's suspicion that something may be wrong, you want to call a personal injury attorney and say, this is what I think happened. This is what I'm concerned about. Do you think we have a potential case here? That's what happened in the airbag case that we had. The wife was incapacitated because she was the driver. The husband wasn't in the vehicle at the time. He's the one that called me and said, this is all I know. My wife had a medical episode. She hit a tree and the airbags didn't go off. And I'm just wondering what happened. And so we got involved and said, let's figure out what happened. The roadway issue here is concerning to me. To hear officers give a interview to the news, to the media, and say that the roadway is unsafe is troubling. And it's troubling for the governmental entity, which they actually work for, whether it's the city, the county, or the state. it's troubling because it sounds like they know that this is a dangerous area or a dangerous stretch of roadway, and maybe there isn't enough safeguards in place to eliminate these types of accidents. That could be concerning here, depending on how all the facts flush out with Tiger Woods. So there's a lot more to learn, a lot more to know. I'm sure the media is going to keep us updated and informed on what is going on, not only with Tiger Woods' recovery, but the potential factors or things that created this crash event. And then we'll know more, right? But I at least wanted to jump in right away and explain how we might evaluate this without knowing anything more than what we all know at this point. So we wish Tiger Woods a speedy recovery. We hope that it isn't more complicated than maybe some just sort of mishap. We don't know that at this point, but these are things that we take into consideration when we're looking at these potential claims. So if you find yourself in a single vehicle accident, don't assume that it's just your fault and that there aren't these other things that could be at play that could be reasons that you have a viable claim to pursue. That's it for this week's episode of the Legal Beagle Podcast. If you have any questions about the things that we discussed today, please give me a call. Please email me. All of our information is on our website, negrettilaw.com. Thanks, guys.